Okay, we should now be streaming on YouTube. And we'll call to order this meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Policy Committee at 9:03 a.m. on May 27th. Members in attendance, Sean Stinson and Chris Parkin.
And I call to order the special meeting of the Region 9 Policy Committee meeting at 9:04 a.m. Members in attendance are Sarah Lieberger and Kathy Thompson.
Our first item is the approval of minutes. Now, I'm just double checking to make sure that we have the right minutes published on the website.
May 6 and May 13 were with the agenda packet for the joint meeting and May committee, and the May 3rd Region 9 minutes were also in that packet.
Yep. I'm seeing all of these.
So I have no objection as to the minutes that relate to the joint committee.
Yep. Yep. No objection here either. So absent objection, the Joint Policy Committee approves.
Kathy, did you have any thoughts about the May 3rd minutes for Region 9?
Oh, you're on mute.
Everything looked fine.
Okay, great.
Good. Okay, so absent objection approved for Region 9 as well. Good.
Approved.
Okay, that'll take us to public comment. No members of the public being present. We'll move to committee member comment. Hearing none, we'll jump to discussion of possible action. So I think really the name of the game here first is to make sure that we have a plan for finalization and start to talk about what mature state looks like. I think the idea that we move to quarterly meetings, I think is desirable. I think we all look forward to that day where we don't have a weekly meeting on to talk about this stuff. But I think we probably have a little bit of work to do, for a little bit longer. I think we have a good collection of policies that we have a broad agreement on across the sort of joint committee as well as the Region 9 committee. And I think we have a sort of series of policies that we're going to need to scrutinize to say, to what degree do we want to hold these others for now. I know that the Reading board is first up for their second reading and approval. And so my intent is to sort of manage to that date and sort of what is manageable, what is sort of realistic for us to achieve by that date, and for Easton to mirror sort of those policies approved at the Reading meeting, unless there's a compelling reason not to. In that way, we'll at least be able to hand to the administration sort of the consolidation of 2 of the 3 policy books that are consistent. And then my thought is that, I think we'll probably have, after the Easton meeting on, I think it's the 14th of June, that after that meeting, we probably will need to continue to meet at a minimum monthly. But I think it would be beneficial if we had a couple of sort of weekly meetings to just kind of sort of plot out, like, how do we see the rest of these sort of whatever policies we don't get to, how do we see that finishing up there?
And I think at that point, on the 17th or whatever that date would be, we should probably also just have everybody prepared to align calendars around vacations and things, so that there are 10 weeks in the summer. I'm going to guess that 4 of them are mutually convenient for everybody. So.
Yeah, good. From the Region 9 side, and does that mean that all sounds consistent, right? I think we do, in fact, have a large body of policies that are moving forward at the same time, and they're all consistent. And there's a handful of additional deltas on the Region 9 side. My perspective is that it's not fruitful for us to try to reconcile those now ahead of the sort of Reading and the Easton second readings. And that we just focus on sort of where we have the wins and figure out the way that we reconcile and sort of coordinate once we sort of move past the major hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Correct. And Kathy, you may want to fill them in just, briefly, what you've been tackling while I've been attending to some family issues. Because we do have policy committee on our side is trying to go through things and clean up some of the policies and get them ready for the second reading. We have a tentative date of Monday, June 13th on our end. So it does align with what you're talking about, and that sounds good. But Kathy, feel free if there's anything you want to add to that.
Well, what I would add is that we, at our policies went to first reading, and Sarah Scrofani sent us today, I don't know if you had a chance to see it, Sarah, the spreadsheet of Region 9 board member comments of part of their first reading. So we do have board member comments from several of the board members, their input on any questions or potential changes. And we just got them. So I did look through them quickly. Many of the policies, there are no comments or no changes. A few of them there are questions. Some of the questions have been addressed by us already or by Shipman and Goodwin, but because they're first reading the original Shipman policy without changes, that could be the reason for that. We haven't had a chance to reconcile their comments against the comments potentially that Shipman's already addressed that they may not realize, or they may just be emphasizing the same questions. But we do have input from our board. I don't know if you guys have gotten any feedback from your board members during first reading.
So help me understand what the feedback sort of process has been at Region 9. This is Sarah has been collecting it individually, or there's a...
I can explain the technology side of things. We created a copy of the spreadsheet for each one of the board members. And then I worked with Sarah yesterday, and she merged their comments to feed into a sheet that the Region 9 Policy Committee can see, view only. So there's no chance that there'll be a back and forth conversation. So that's set up so that anytime a Region 9 board member adds a comment on their own individual spreadsheet, it will feed into the sheet so that Sarah and Kathy and Cheryl can see the comments.
Okay.
And we can certainly, if you're interested, Chris, we can certainly do the same thing for Reading and John for Easton.
No, I think there are serious FOIA problems with that process. So no, I'm good. I think the way that the process is meant to happen according to FOIA is that this dialogue happen in open meetings. So we've provided, more than a month ago, the copy of the policies to board members, and that those board members can review, if they wanted to, they can make a copy and do it digitally, but it would be on their own. And then they can bring those to the board meeting in the second reading to provide those comments. Alternatively, they could show up at this meeting and sort of discuss those items. But to do that offline, even individually, I mean, it's an online meeting that's being held serially. Unless somebody says, no, actually, here's the good advice from Shipman on, this is the right way to do it. It sounds to me like illegal online meetings.
I don't have the same concern. I think that this threads the needle to a certain extent. It's not unlike saying, I would like feedback, please send all the feedback to me. The feedback is all being made available to the committee. I mean, I think it's probably better if the feedback was only channeled to the committee's chair, who could then bring it to the committee to have that conversation. The fact that the entire committee can review all the comments in their own time suggests as if the committee is having their, but that I don't want to get hung up in the technicalities. I think it's ultimately a defensible process. I do think it's helpful for us to know what those comments are collectively, because to the extent that an issue has been raised in Region 9 as to the swimming pools policy or whatever it is, we'll all want to make sure we can do what we can to accommodate those comments and align the policies without diversions. I've gotten 0 comments from anybody about anything from my board. So, but I also don't want to spend the balance of our time on process and procedure if we can avoid it. I think we jump into the policies that we flagged weeks ago and work through closing those issues. And then as time permits, work into the Region 9 specific comments that can't be readily resolved by pointing to, we already talked about this, don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah, good. Okay. So Chris, do you have sort of from the list that you approved for first reading at your meeting, what are your thoughts about, sort of, I mean, I think we're talking about, there were the 8 policies where we had specifically called out, we have concerns about these and received some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
What is your posture on sort of those versus some of the others that were flagged for us?
I think my mind is on your slides 6 and 7, whatever it was.
Yep.
And just working through them one by one and saying, is this good? Is this, what changes do we need to make? What advice we received? Are all the questions resolved? And then just plow through them. And the
Yep.
shorter we make that list, the happier we'll all be.
Yeah, agreed. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So do we want to start with deadly weapons or firearms?
Let's do it.
Okay. Let's dive in. Is this one that has received some feedback on the Region 9 side?
I'm looking, I mean, I have to, Sarah, part of the process to be compliant with FOIA was that Sarah sent it to us in the context of this policy committee meeting. We did not receive it in advance. So we just got it.
So they're
Okay.
viewing it during the live policy meeting. So I can tell you that there was a question regarding whether this covers ghost guns.
I see. Okay. And
Yeah. I'm looking
Okay.
at the feedback right now. Mike would like to eliminate all optional language. And Todd had mentioned that section 4B has an option to be deleted. And section 4C has the option to be added. Note at the end to be deleted. So you may not see it there, but I think what's, he's mentioning is in our side of things, how this was done for Region 9. We have our first reading batch. He may just have made a note at the end of his.
okay.
I believe the note at the end is a Shipman note.
The drafting note that should come out in the
Yes.
final.
Okay.
I believe that's to what he refers.
Yeah. Right. It feels like we need to make recommendations as to the optional language, up or down, and make sure that all these comments are otherwise resolved from March, and then make a recommendation on the policy.
That I agree with.
And I will add that one of our questions to Shipman was that they replied to was around, it wasn't specifically ghost guns, wasn't the term used, but it was like fake guns, pretend guns, that sort of language. So, and Shipman did reply to that and said that this did cover, we could be more specific about listing weapons, deadly weapons, but their recommendation was that this language covered those issues, though we did not specifically ask.
It doesn't cover a water gun.
Right. Well, I think by ghost guns, plastic homemade weapons, that's plastic homemade weapons. I'm not clear what she means by that. Like Chris, you're saying a water gun, a pretend gun, a play gun, if you will.
My connection is breaking up a little bit. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had asked Shipman about pretend guns that somebody might bring to school out of, if they had them at school, like a Nerf gun, for example. And Shipman's reply had been that we could make the language more specific, but they felt that the policy as written covered that sort of thing.
There's no way that it would, that a deadly weapon means a Nerf gun.
Right.
I can go back. I'd have to pull it. I was going through there.
Right. I'm trying to pull my stuff up as well.
Yeah. Do we want to go on and we can come back to this one, and Sarah and I can look for it? The Shipman comment.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the optional language and the other. There's plenty to talk about in this.
Yeah, let's maybe start at the top and go down. Yeah. So for Region 9 school, did we bottom out on this? Or we have sort of preface language that's going to help us to account for this?
Yeah, I think this works no matter what, because in the event that there's no secondary school, then it's just the elementary schools. And if there's no elementary school, it's just secondary schools. I mean, you could just say that the comprising the district schools, but then we're getting into wordsmithing that we want to try to avoid.
Right.
I mean, we could change the and to an or.
We could, but
That would change the whole definition.
It works this way. The only reason to change it is so that it is specifically customized for our schools, but it doesn't need to be, because it does work. Right. If one day Region 9 encompasses elementary schools, then the policy still works. Mm-hmm. If Region 9 doesn't have elementary schools, the policy works. It works either way. And in this way, our ability to stay in line with, I mean, this is like the sort of foundational principle that we started with, which is, unless there's a compelling reason to change it, best to stay in line with the language that is in Shipman's model policy. So, I mean, unless Region 9 is not comfortable with that, then I think it's a function of, are we going to spend the time to wordsmith inside of each individual policy, or is Easton and Reading going to say, we're comfortable with it, we'll move forward with this, and if Region 9 wants to customize, they can do what they're going to do.
Right. I'm fine with the language as is.
Yeah.
In that section.
I will add that at our Region 9 board meeting, our next step, to Sarah's point, is on June 13th. We're sending everything to second reading. Mm-hmm. And as part of that, we're going to be providing a red line and a final copy, a clean copy so those two pieces of policy work will be presented or shared with the Region 9 board on June 13th. So when we go back and we've started actually redlining these policies. So to that end, and I know we're getting back into process a little bit, but do you guys, and then Sarah was going to share all of these with Shipman so that before June 13th, Shipman had final feedback. Here's the whole package, and here's the whole package of policies that have gone to first reading, that have reflect everybody's comments, that have the header, that have optional language chosen or deleted. They're all cleaned up. And here's the policies that we're retaining and repealing. Shipman, are we covered? Are all the changes we've accepted in the context of repeal, adopt, retain, is everything good?
And they're going to tell you should take all of their policies and you should replace the existing ones that they can't give you opinions on because they didn't draft them. This is an exercise in churning billable hours, is what it sounds like.
That's exactly right. I think I don't mean to offend anybody, but Region 9 has gone way off the rails. I mean, like the point here is that we're unless there's a compelling reason to change it, these are the policies that align to the laws. And so, reviewing them is absolutely essential because we need to understand whether or not there are compelling reasons. But if upon review, we find we can make the simple decisions that the language calls for, we can choose to include the optional language or not include the optional language, and avoid the sort of wordsmithing. Like, there's no need to go back to Shipman with any of this stuff. The only reason would be if we decide to make word changes that frankly are unnecessary.
And to be clear, this policy was on slide 6 or whatever it is, that spreadsheet, not because of this sort of pedantic question, but
Right.
because of substantive questions about optional language that we need to make recommendations about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the exercise, at least from my perspective, the joint policy committee is not planning to send more billable hours to Shipman for these policies. They've joined us, they've provided us with feedback. We've had a great dialogue with them. There may be future questions, but this certainly isn't one of them in my mind. So I think this is the kind of thing that I'm comfortable moving forward with. It sounds like Chris is comfortable moving forward with. I think the recommendation of the joint committee to our respective boards is that we adopt, this section here and move forward.
Right. I think we have substantive questions about realistic replicas and dangerous instruments coming, and I think we should address that and what we want the policy to be, because this is one where the Shipman policy applies to actual deadly weapons, and some existing policy extends that beyond actual deadly weapons to replicas.
Right.
And I think there's a discussion to be had about whether that's the intent or desire of the committee to recommend that the policy be so expanded.
Okay. So, okay. And I found the deadly weapons language. I think Sarah and I, and Cheryl are in our Region 9 board is engaged at a different level than it sounds like the Reading and Easton boards are engaged, because
No.
we've gotten comments and you guys haven't, and at our
No.
past. And
No.
I'm not saying that as a insult to anybody. I'm just saying we get a lot of feedback and input on this process.
And that feedback thoroughly misunderstands the role of committees in the board processes. It also misunderstands the sort of the point of this entire exercise that is starting with Shipman's policies. If what I suspect is happening is that you're getting wordsmithing advice from your board members that's going to turn this into an even greater mess than it already is. I think we need to move forward. And if that means we need to have a sort of separate joint policy committee versus Region 9 meeting so that Chris and I can create the largest set of agreed upon policies for second reading as possible in the remaining 30 minutes we have.
Right. I mean, it's quite clear that 3 months ago, we had this conversation.
Yes.
After Region 9 refused to join this committee.
Yes.
Where they said, we think Shipman should just do all of this work. And it sounds like we're right back to that again, where even if we change a the to an and, that we're going to have Shipman charge us $300 to tell us whether that's an acceptable grammatical change to what's probably crappy draftsmanship.
Right.
Like, that's what it boils down to. I'm not interested in that process. I'm interested in making substantive decisions about policies so that we can actually deliver on this project.
Okay. I don't think the intent of reviewing everything with Shipman is to have them proofread every policy that is for a minor change. For example, he, she goes to they, for example. That's not the intent.
You're giving them red lines of the whole thing. That's exactly what you're doing.
What we're going to give them is what we want from them. And Sarah, jump in if this is not what you understood, but is that they will look at everything as a whole. It's not that they're rereading every policy and looking at every tweaky change. It's that the policies that you have retained and the policies that you've repealed and the policies that you're adopting as a whole, those lists are consistent with a complete compliant set of policies. So for example, you really should, at our Region 9 board meeting, there was input that had been received from Shipman outside of our committee, which was a separate discussion. However, it was brought to our attention that the title Shipman's strong recommendation was that the Title IX policies should be adopted as not on the retained list. So there
Because
are
they
things,
want us to adopt everything that they drafted because they will only defend policies that they drafted. It's their self-interest. I totally understand it, but it defeats the entire purpose of the past 3 months of work that we've done.
okay, that was
We could
one.
have just taken their whole policy book and moved on, but we
I-
made the deliberate decision not to do that.
I'm trying to communicate where, as a Region 9 policy committee and as a board, we are. And we got feedback that I'm sharing with all of you so that we're all on the same page. And so if it, and I understand it's distressful to you,
because it's a waste of time, Kathy.
Yeah.
That's
It
why
is.
it's stressful. As somebody who's been doing this work for 2.5 years, it's a
Yeah.
waste of my time.
Right. It's tough.
so
We've
you
been
guys-
talking around in circles.
And
right?
I think Sarah and I both appreciate that. And if Cheryl were here too. But, and Sarah, jump in if this isn't where you think we are. My feeling is that we've got we've gotten input from our board, and this is what it is. So we have to choose how we're going to address it and how we move forward to get these to second reading and approved and in place in a timely fashion. That's where we are. And we're not in the same place that you guys are. That's just the reality that we have. So you guys let us know what works best for you, because we don't want to spin anybody's wheels and we do not want to, Sarah, Cheryl, and I do not want to do that to you guys. So
yeah. And I want to be really clear. My board is fully engaged.
yes,
They have been, every board member reading through each policy. The process of receiving that feedback, though, is that they started with a clear understanding when we presented at first reading that unless there is a meaningful, compelling reason to change the content of any of these policies, we should heavily favor adopting the policy as written. So the feedback that we will receive will be during our second reading. We will talk about that in public the way that we're supposed to and have total transparency about the process that we're going through. And if during that conversation, which will be a meaty conversation and should be, right? There's three major things that boards of education are supposed to be focused on. This is one of those three things. And so the extent to which we have a fully engaged board, set of board members who understand each and every policy and are able to discuss it in public, I think that's a sort of very valuable process. Now, for whatever reason, Region 9 has decided to go another way to sort of get that feedback. And I think that's fine, but sort of for now, I think what we are looking for is to try to talk about the substance stuff. So the versus the Region 9 school versus elementary and secondary schools, we're talking about style and not something that actually matters to the outcome. And Shipman has written it in this way so that it is as flexible as possible for as many districts as possible.
And remember, those comments are from the very first week or two. So that's
no, totally. I get that, but we're still talking about it right now. And we should have said, no, we're fine with that one. Or we should have said, Region 9 is not fine with that, but Easton and Reading are going to move forward.
Mm-hmm. So just to forgive me if I gave the impression that when I said engaged, I meant engaged in a different way is what I was the intent of the comment.
It's the feedback process is different. That's fair. I think that's totally fair.
Not that they weren't engaged at all and just gave you no comments because they don't care. That is not at all what I meant. I meant the engagement is different.
Yeah, I said to my board, if you have comments before, we have a weekly 9 o'clock policy meeting. show up to that meeting, talk to us, tell us, give us your feedback there. You could send me a note and say, hey, I have a bunch of feedback, and we can figure out a way to do that in a sort of FOIA compliant way. But I did not sort of ask for them to sort of all go through and submit comments before. I also suspect that as they're going through these policies, they're saying, yeah, these are good. Like, overwhelmingly, these are good.
The first optional language is with respect to hunting. I think we declined to accept it.
Is that this piece that's on the screen here?
It is C. The person possesses deadly weapon while crossing school grounds to access hunting.
This guy. So pass on this option was
I would
your
delete the
comment back on
language, and I
March
would
10th.
not permit hunters to have firearms on campus.
Yeah. So
Correct.
our intent is to remove this.
Right. My recommendation to remove that and the parenthetical above that explains the option.
Okay.
I would adopt C, but with what's now, I guess, the other C, the armed school security officer, on the assumption that the administration is in compliance with 10-244A with respect to that program. So I think we definitely need language to permit a security officer to be in possession as an exception to the general policy.
Chris,
And-
when you said our, you mean Reading specifically?
In what
In your, in
The
your,
Reading
in your
SSO
note,
program.
in your comment, the our
I-
SSO program, is that specific to Reading is different?
it was a broad comment. I understand there's SSO and SRO, and I just want to make sure that it's all compliant with the statute. Because there's a different structure with who's employing who where.
Mhm.
Because school districts opting to hire is its
Right.
own,
Employed
right.
versus contracted.
Like if the police department assigns somebody to the district, they are not
Right.
employed by the district, but they are on campus carrying a weapon.
Right.
And we want to, I assume that there's some broader carve out that allows a peace officer to enter on armed
Right.
regardless. But I also don't want to get into some funky thing where only an SSO hired by the district can carry, but a police officer who's substituting that day can't.
Right. Dr. Pearson-Ugal, are you aware of the nuance of our sort of implementation of SSOs or SROs?
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different in the three districts. So the arrangement at the high school in particular is different than at least one of the two other districts. So I think Chris's comment is a good one. I think we need to be careful about that because I don't believe that all the people we have on campus who are armed and functioning in security are employed by the Board of Education.
So is it reasonable for us to this seems like a policy that we could move forward with but flag for revision to include that language, but that's something that we want to sort of coordinate with Shipman on. Chris, do you agree that we could move forward as is, but this would be a fast follow?
I think that this should be a 2-line email to Dory or whomever that's because I thought this one might have been flagged for them already, and we might have comments on this, but just to say, we have 3 districts. In some districts, we have an employed SSO. In other districts, we have an assigned police officer. Does this language adequately cover that? In other words, do police officers already sworn to the department have a per se right to enter on campus armed, in which case it doesn't matter? Or do we need to tweak this language to cover all 3 models in a way that is appropriate? And I haven't looked up 10-244A, which also might answer the question.
So flagged for that, and I agree. That's a very quick note. Agree extraneous, but not so egregious that we need to wordsmith.
Correct. Yeah. Goodbye.
Right. Policy with the same name here.
This is a conformance issue.
Yep.
We got to make sure that our student discipline policy is called student discipline policy.
Right.
And I'm not sure. And that comes into the what's being adopted, what's being appealed. Are we pulling over one with that title?
Yep. So we have In the 5,000 series, we have a student discipline policy entitled student discipline.
And that's been moved forward without concern, it seems like.
Correct.
Okay, then I'm fine with that. Agrees all the comment.
Good.
So can I just jump in because
Sure.
student discipline policy is related to the facsimile weapons question. And the answer that we received from Shipman is, the question was, are replicas in
Right.
quotes included in the definition of deadly weapons? Answer: the definitions and language in this policy are taken directly from state law prohibiting possession and or use of deadly weapons and firearms on school property. This policy applies broadly to the community. The model student discipline policy prohibits students from possessing any weapon facsimile as well.
Mhm.
The boards could decide to prohibit any community member from possessing a weapon facsimile on school property, although the provision may be more difficult to enforce than the similar policy requirement for students.
Right. That all makes 100% sense.
Yeah, I think all that sounds right, and I don't think requires sort of additional edits here.
Right. And I think that allows us to accept the deadly weapon question here and just be
That's
done.
right. That's right.
This policy is resolved subject to the one question about making sure that our SSO
Right.
program is appropriately confined,
I agree with that.
or SRO program.
Right. SSO, SRO. Okay. And I think we're agreeing. Good. Okay. Excellent. Oops. Okay, green clean. Okay.
So Shipman did reply to this, and their response was to the question, is there a personal hygiene exception to the required statement listed in paragraph 2, number 4? Answer: the highlighted statement is required to be included in the green cleaning program of the board, and it does not include an exception for personal use. Further, green cleaning program means the procurement and proper use of environmentally preferable cleaning products in school buildings and facilities. An environmentally preferable cleaning product includes, but is not limited to, general purpose cleaners, bathroom cleaners, carpet cleaners, glass cleaners, floor finishes, floor strippers, hand cleaners, and soaps. Thus, hand cleaners are covered by this policy, and the statement must be included as written.
Right.
That said, the only legal requirement is that the statement be publicized in the green cleaning program notice. There is no requirement that the district engage in any additional steps relative to items that may be brought into school buildings.
So you can ostrich it to your heart's content as long as you have the statement in there, which is still
Essentially, you don't have to, the law does not require any kind of surveillance and enforcement of this, right? However, a parent who is concerned about this issue could point to this policy and I think be righteous in their anger that we're not enforcing it.
Right. I mean, we're enforcing a procurement program and we're enforcing a notice that says don't do this, but we don't have any policy that say that it's a violation of policy to do it.
Right.
It's cutesy.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's Shipman's pretty adept way of saying, like, look, this is the best we can do because that's what the law says.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next recourse is
Or don't have a green cleaning program.
Or petition your state, lawmaker to say, hey, here's where this law has some holes in it, and it would be nice if you could amend it.
I mean, the option of not having a green cleaning program, I think, is the option to.
Right.
It's either we're going to enforce a ban on individuals bringing hand sanitizer, we are going to intentionally say don't do it and look the other way,
Right.
or we're just not going to have this program, are the three
Right.
options.
Mhm.
That's right. Okay. And so I think we're saying we're good to move this forward, and I think
I think we suck it up and
do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it became an issue that somebody has a mini hand-sized hand cleaner clipped to their backpack,
Right.
if that becomes an issue with people, because it's best practice, not mandatory, we can repeal it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's right. Okay. So good to clear this.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
so that gets moved or noted on our sheet is done.
Yep.
I like how this looks like smoking is mandatory, John.
Right. Smoking.
It's a very progressive policy in ER9, mandatory smoking policy.
Right. We received a response to this. I thought we actually already closed this one out because we talked to not Gwen about this.
Well, we did talk to, Dory did answer this.
Dory.
The one
Yep.
thing that around I'm happy to read her answer for everybody as a reminder or not, whatever you guys prefer.
Yeah. If you have it at hand, that would be fabulous. Yeah.
So the first question was, what is considered school grounds for purposes of this policy? And the answer is, while school grounds is not specifically defined in the policy, it is a common term used throughout Connecticut statutes and our policies. The term is understood to constitute any property monitored and maintained by the school district, including school buildings, administrative buildings, fields, etc. And then the second question, are school buses covered by this policy? And the answer is yes. Boards of education are required to provide school accommodations to school-aged children, which includes transportation. As such, even though a school district may not own the buses used to transport students, the transportation of students is a school-sponsored activity because it is mandated by law. School bus contractors are agents of the Board of Education by contract. This policy prohibits smoking at all school-sponsored activities, including transportation. If the boards would like, the term school transportation can be added, but we do not believe it is necessary.
So
I would add school transportation because I don't think that the plain meaning of this policy says what they say it says.
I agree. And if they've already given us in writing that they don't have an issue with us adding it, I think it helps us.
Right.
And I would also say, this is the kind of thing we should flag for them to just fix this. We get that it may not be necessary, but it's helpful for clarity's sake. And, in future readings, this should go out to all of your members.
This is belt and suspenders, because really what we're talking about is saying school bus drivers can't smoke while they're waiting between runs, and they have to step outside and do it, which I'm fairly confident is our provider's policy anyway.
Yeah. So what was it that they said we could add here? I want to make sure I capture it specifically.
They said, if the boards would like, the term school transportation can be added. So I guess we could add it after anywhere.
Or on the grounds of such school.
Or
on school transportation.
Or on school transportation.
And I'll put a comma before that too, just to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not the last comma.
Yep.
There we go.
Good.
Do you want to highlight that or something?
I do.
Clearly demark that we made some editorial change there.
Yep.
Which paragraph is that? I'm just making a note of it.
Paragraph 1.
Okay.
It's towards the end of paragraph 1 on the prohibition against smoking.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
I think if you're explaining it to board members, it's fair to say that it was the position of council that this is not a substantive change, it is a clarifying change.
Right. Use of school facilities.
All right. So we do have answers from Shipman on that as well.
Mhm.
To the question, why are Boy Scouts named specifically? The answer is 20 USC 7905 is a federal law that specifically requires schools in receipt of federal education funds that designate an open forum to provide equal access or a fair opportunity to meet to the Boy Scouts specifically named in the law, or any other youth group listed in a certain federal law. Schools also may not discriminate against the Boy Scouts or similar groups. This policy designates an open forum by permitting use of school facilities by outside organizations. Thus, it is important to clarify that federal law requires that the school provide equal access to the Boy Scouts. So it's a
Good.
federal law.
Good. So that helps explain that. Yep.
Question 2, this language appears restrictive. Which was the language is shall not be used without the express written permission of the administrator. And the answer to that is the boards can remove or relax this language if desired. The language expresses best practice with respect to use of school facilities and the equipment with respect to liability. We recommend this language because it allows the schools to prepare for additional wear and tear on equipment and ensure that organizations are using equipment and facilities in the correct manner. For example, the administrator of designee should have noticed that a group will be using electronic equipment so that it can be set up in the correct manner and staff can be provided if needed. If there were no prior permission to use the equipment, it could be broken or someone could be injured because they were not instructed how to safely use the equipment.
Okay. So Chris, are you okay with, given that explanation and clearing this?
If the administration's okay with the burden it imposes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means express written permission. And
paperwork.
Right. And when we're not doing that, the sort of that practice may be scrutinized down the road, right? Hold on a second. Why are these Chromebooks all worn out? Why did we need to refresh these Chromebooks earlier? Well, because we had this thing. Oh, you were giving express written
I'm not
permission.
even thinking about equipment. I'm thinking about when the Reading Park and Rec Department is scheduling use of the cafeteria at RES for, the XYZs who want to meet there at 3:00 on Friday. Now, unless there's a sign off from a school administrator, that can't happen.
Or it's out of policy. It can happen out of policy. Right.
Right. And then when the other group is told they need to sign off the administrator's not there, and they point to group A that didn't need the administrator, it becomes
unfair.
One of these equity issues.
Yep.
Just because of red tape. That's all.
Right.
But it's operational. So if there's no objection from administration, it's fine.
Right. Okay. Good.
So
I think
this question Shipman answered.
Yeah.
Well, it says the model policy does not specifically identify where the forms are to be submitted. This location may differ for each school district. Right. Hard copies are facilities use agreements. Wait, that must be a typo.
Yeah, it's a different one.
Hard copies of facility use agreements are not required to be kept in hard copy. However, whether in hard copy or electronic form, the form should be maintained in a centralized location along with the indemnification waiver.
Yep.
This should all be electronic and it should all be set up so that central office maintains a repository of all the signups. And there's a workflow that I'm thinking a certain person in central office might be able to design pretty readily.
Yes. So currently, there is a process for this, but it's not centralized. So
Right.
we can
But
certainly
I
include
feel
that.
like we can leverage technology really well to resolve a lot of these issues. And if you could have an administrator electronically signing off on their phone
Boom.
on a Friday night for use of the building, it solves a lot of this.
Yeah, here. Yeah, and then you actually have an audit trail and something you can report on, and you can actually start to make the case for here's why this building is such an important part of the community. We can.
It's been used for 700 hours this year by outside groups in the fall.
Exactly, as a community hub. Okay.
So can I just ask about town there?
Yeah.
Does that need to be clarified in the case of Region 9? And
yeah, it's strange to me that it wouldn't have a regional variation here.
Because it says we have two towns. I mean,
Right.
So do we want to say?
If you scroll up a little, sir.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, right. Like is Barlow only
Easton
only
and or-
accessible to Reading residents versus Easton and Reading?
Right.
Right.
I understand the overarching goal here, but does this one in particular need clarification?
Yeah, they've been good in other policies about having the regional variation,
Mhm.
and I'm not seeing it here.
And is this, I'm looking at our feedback that we received. This isn't addressed in it?
No,
School store, no?
it was
Mm-mm.
school. Well, school store is
Right.
the next,
Right, okay.
and concession administrative approval around refreshments, the school store and concession stand, but that town was not addressed.
So let me just highlight this guy and check in with Shipman. I think this is another, couple of sentences to Shipman to say town, and then maybe, a parenthetical or towns in the case of a regional district.
This might be one where all three boards can say town of Reading or Easton.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is just about prioritizing access. I don't think there's a problem with saying that Easton ASO has the same access to the RES cafeteria as, Reading Torch Club, and vice versa. It's going to come up,
Yeah.
on the first of never, but it is relevant for Region 9 to say, look, it's a joint facility. If the Easton so-and-so wants to use the cafeteria, God bless him at Barlow. Can we scroll up a little bit further?
Mhm.
Did we get feedback on this comment about the table? Because I'm concerned that this policy is getting too regulatory.
Mhm.
And
There
we
is
have this
no,
issue with athletic director.
we do not have Shipman feedback that I've seen on the table here.
Because it feels like both this application procedure and the order of priority could be deferred to a regulation, which would allow us to solve for a lot of these issues.
Mhm.
For example, back to this comment about the field behind RES cannot be approved by the athletic director because there is no athletic director.
Right.
And so we immediately have this conflict where it should say building principal or designee for all of these things, and the designee can be different in a way that makes sense.
Mhm.
Right.
Which seems to be why this ought to just fall into a regulatory framework.
Well, so given that, and that there seems to be a few items here that would require input, my inclination is to take a look at volunteers now and see if that's an easy one.
Yeah,
because we can
let's see
check-
if we can do it in 90
minutes.
to 120 seconds.
Yeah.
So Shipman did reply to this question. And, why are employees prohibited from serving as volunteers? Is this to prevent a grievance? Answer, as suggested, there may be collective bargaining concerns related to permitting employees to volunteer under all circumstances. The qualifying language allows for the superintendent or designee to employ a case-by-case analysis as to whether employees may volunteer under certain conditions and circumstances, which may include judging school-wide competitions, for example. Careful consideration should be taken concerning individual collective bargaining agreements.
Mhm. So and then I think we're okay with it as written.
I think it's fine.
Good. And just verifying. Yep, that's it for that one. FMLA in 10 seconds.
All right, we had, I'm just reading the Shipman note we got. A drop purpose was the question, although it's not required. We recommend maintaining the purpose section of the policy as an introductory phrase, which also serves to define the terms board and FMLA that are referenced throughout the policy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know Chris needs to jump. And I think we've got a couple of things from Vicky that we need to look for, which we may or may not have. But
you had comment. I thought there was a comment somewhere about light duty generally not being available. I'm not sure I agree with that, but
right.
From a legal perspective. Okay. with apologies, I'm going to move that we adjourn the joint meeting at 9:58 a.m. and also regroup with you, John, and I guess Sarah about future scheduling, because I understand that, John, you're not available next week.
Correct.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Absent objection, the joint committee is adjourned at 9:58.
Enjoy the long weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah,
Happy Memorial
everyone.
Day.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay, Kathy, did you want to also adjourn at this time, or is there anything else that you wanted to continue on?
Well, I think we need to, I just think we have issues we have to resolve as to our, you know, you've been at you've been at the same meetings I've been at, and I didn't say what I said to throw a wrench into everything. I just think we have to be realistic about when we go to our board, it's not the same meeting that they go back to.
Right.
And I think we have to be realistic about that. You, Cheryl and I, me, because it won't be smooth. It'll be a bumpy road for us. And so I feel like we're stuck in the middle here between the joint committee and there's no, and being a team player and collaborating and all of that. And I feel like we've been doing that so well. And we've really made a huge amount of progress. But there's no leeway there either.
Right.
And I feel like when we go back to the Region 9 board, there's just this push and pull, and we're in the middle. So, you know, and I understand Chris and John's point of view, and I know this has been years for them, and it's been a few months for us. So that's colors everything too. I mean, we're still like fresh as daisies, and they've been through the ringer. So now these red line policies, I don't know the best way to move forward without, we annoy Chris and John, and we annoy our board. And I think we have to figure that out, the best way forward for as a committee serving the Region 9 board, and as a committee trying to collaborate with the tri-district. And I feel like we're stuck in the middle.
Right.
And it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't reflect well on us on either side. And I don't think that's great.
Sure. And I'm in agreement with you. I know a rock and a hard place right now. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute as I was trying to give you feedback before, but
I thought you were just nodding.
I was nodding. No, I think what we can do is continue on with the process as we have been doing. So you're handling the redlining. I haven't seen any of that. We're not communicating through the process, so we're not creating a FOIA issue. We haven't communicated other than right here today about the Excel sheet that we got from Sarah Scrifani. So that has not been a discussion. I don't believe we're in a FOIA issue either as well with that.
And Chris didn't have that concern either. When John said that, I was like, oh my gosh, because we talked through it so carefully. But it sounds like
right.
we are A-okay.
I agree. And administration was part of that conversation, and
yes.
They know the rules. So I believe everything's fine on that end. And Cheryl's not here today either. So we haven't even talked with her about any of the feedback, nor have we broken it down ourselves. So I think that it would probably be beneficial for us to look at our calendar. John has a conflict next Friday.
Okay. Next Friday is June 3rd.
June 3rd. And
And it's a short week, Monday's off.
Right. So that would be Friday the 3rd. The following week, we would still have to go through everything to red line, et cetera, and see where we're at with edits and optional language. It
you
may
just-
be helpful if we all come together, you, Cheryl, and I, and we discuss where we're at. And then see if you have any questions for us, or if you need our feedback on some of the optional language.
Mhm.
Then we can also look at the feedback that we received from our committee as well, or from our board as well. We can bring that to the table then. Would that be beneficial to do before the 13th, before they get, I mean, so, because by the 13th, we have to have everything wrapped up on our end.
Right.
So if we can't meet the 3rd with Chris and John, maybe we work towards like an evening of the 5th or the 7th.
Well, the 5th is a Sunday. I cannot do that Sunday.
That's fine. Well, and I don't know what Cheryl's availability is, so let's just come up with some options to present her with.
I'm wondering I don't remember what dates they said they had their board meetings, because here's the other question. When they go to their next board meeting, which will be before our Region 9 next board meeting.
Mhm.
And to John's point, he expects to get potentially some comments and discussion in that meeting. So is the thought that then he and Chris, if he gets the same, some feedback as well, they would bring that back to the board meeting, the policy meeting, the joint policy meeting, and go through it? Because if they get different comments, then everybody has to discuss everybody's comments. And our board comments, which we have, were not discussed today, which is fine. But at what point does that all get resolved? And we have a June 13th deadline.
Right. So the Reading Board of Ed meeting is June 7th.
Okay.
So ultimately, they need to get through this process and continue what we were doing today before the 7th. So they can't meet the 3rd. They're going to come up with an alternative before the 7th to get it done. And then Easton's Board of Ed meeting is the 14th.
So that's
a week later. Yeah.
and that's after the 13th.
So, but they'll be, I think they'll have everything compiled on their end by the 7th. And at least if there's additional feedback from Reading, they'll have that feedback. We'll have our feedback. I'm not sure if John's going to have to wait until the 14th from his board to get some feedback. So,
but here's my question. The expectation is that we're getting a second reading policy to our board on the 13th. If John gets feedback on the 14th, that's different. And that could change something potentially. Are we going to, what would we do with that information?
We could,
because I don't want to go back and forth and say, hey, everybody, this policy is actually different because because Easton had a comment and we're going to change it. I think that will not go over well. I can't imagine.
Right.
And I
So
don't
why
know
don't we present the red line policy and that work to them by the 13th and ask for an extension on the final clean versions in case we need to do some final tweaking after the 14th.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. I just feel like it's so, it's really been a rough road here. And I feel like we're all doing our very best. I feel like we're doing our best.
Right.
And we're just a rock and a hard place, like you said. And to go back and say, well, we're not presenting the final copies because the Easton board isn't meeting until the 14th and the springs are going to fly. Like, I just feel like, I don't know. It's hard because everybody's on a different schedule. And I did not mean to offend anybody by saying like your boards aren't engaged. That is not at all what I meant. I'm going to call John because I felt terrible about that. It didn't come out. What I meant was we have different like approaches here is what's going on. So I felt bad that could have been construed in a negative way. It's not what I meant. I don't know, Sarah. I don't know.
I tend to think we might be okay staying on our time frame of the 13th and having everything presented then. I'm not anticipating a ton of differences between the 7th and the 14th, right? I think feedback will be good coming out of the 7th, the Reading Board of Ed meeting. And if there's anything that catches anyone off guard, we'll have time that week in between to be like, yes, we should have seen that. Or that was a great point. I'm glad we addressed it now. And John will be able to work that in as well, right?
Right. But I can't work over that weekend between the 11th and the 12th. I can't work. I can't do this that weekend. Like many weekends I'm fine. I can't that weekend.
No problem. Are you still able to do the meeting on the morning of the 10th?
I'm fine for the week and I'm fine for all day Monday, the 13th, but I can't commit to making changes or working on the 11th or 12th.
Okay, no problem. So let's continue on. Even though John can't be there on the 3rd, we can still have our meeting on the 3rd. We can still have the meeting on the 10th. If you think that in between then we need to add anything else after the 7th or before the 13th or on the 3rd. Yeah. I mean, if you think we need additional meetings before the 13th, think about it and let me know, because you're going through the red lines and I think you'll hit the question marks.
Well, here's the thing. The red lines are, I'm going through now. I had redlined some stuff that then was addressed today. So I'll have to go back and adapt that to what was discussed today, because that was some changes and some additional information. But, after the Reading Board of Ed meeting, am I going to have to, then I've got to go back and redline potentially. And now that's the 7th and the red line won't reflect the Easton comments on the 14th. I feel like,
but today we were just going through the complicated items, right?
Yes, but some of those were in the first reading.
Right.
All of those were actually.
So do we hold off on those then for your red lines until we get more feedback? And do you want to move through everything else, or is everything else the fairly easy?
Well, that's yes. Some of them are there's no comments really. So
yeah, I'm going back to.
And I don't know what we didn't get into what they're presenting. Like, I don't know if they're redlining or not. I don't know how they're addressing it with their boards. We're just in a different situation.
Yeah, I don't think they're redlining. I think what we did today is what will be duplicated and finished and cleaned up, and that's what they'll get to see.
But they're going to get, but they can, when Chris says they're going to second reading on the 7th, he's getting comments. So they're not going to approve everything potentially, because are they going to address comments right there in the meeting and approve it? Because how are they going to do that? They don't have Easton's comments. They don't have Region 9 comments. How does this play out?
Third reading.
They'll
So,
have,
and I think that that has been what the anticipation is. If there's anything that does not get approved at the second reading and needs additional work, it goes to a third reading.
okay. All right,
Which is where our timelines may differ, right? So
Right.
because we may, and I think that that's part of the hand holding that we have through our process with our board is they don't want to go to a third reading.
I
They
know.
want to, clean this up and get things taken care of at the second reading. And that's hence our feedback that we've received.
right. And I think that's our red line and our final, that's how we got to where we are, which does not align with, I mean, John didn't go into their process as much, but it does not seem like it aligns with the process that Chris outlined. So we're going to have to diverge. I don't see, I mean, do you see how this is, if we're at,
I think it's beneficial for us to hear what each other are doing. So that way we can try our very best to keep the policies aligned and the words and language as similar as possible, right? Like no one wants to complicate this more, but I do recognize that there's a shift in our timeframes. And so although our second reading is going to be later than everyone else's, our second reading could also be final for some of our policies before theirs are finalized. So I know it's interesting.
because in theory, we could be approving policies that aren't through their third reading. So I'm just thinking this through, potentially we have approved 40 policies that they're taking to third reading and maybe end up I'm not thinking anything's going to be a dramatic change here,
Right.
but there could be slight differences in theory, unless they're going to say, well, Region 9 approved this and we're being consistent and that's the policy. But I don't know that they're comfortable doing that.
Right. I'm with you on that. And I think what will happen at that point in time, we've already had our second reading. We've already approved and finalized policy. They may potentially be going to a third reading on certain things. If we, at that point in time, once they go to their third reading and things start becoming approved and finalized on their end, if we notice discrepancies, potentially in our Friday meetings when we're discussing things and how we've moved forward, et cetera, because, right, we may not be at the exact same time frame as them, but we can say, this is what we did. Oh, that makes sense. We didn't contemplate that when we approved it, but we're going to bring that edit. What'll happen is we'll find that we're in compliance and our policies are now up to date, the ones that we're moving forward with, right? We're in compliance, but I think because that policy exists, we can then say we need to make an update. And at a later date, here becomes our update list.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, I don't know that everyone on our board has an appetite for that sort of, because what,
right.
like, because here's the discussion I foresee. Why are we updating this policy? And we would have to say, because Region 9 is, because Reading or Easton is. And I don't think that's going to be necessarily viewed as a reason for updating an approved policy and going back to first, second reading. We're just in a tight spot here.
I think we're just going to have to face it when the time comes. And we already know that there's going to be new policies that we're going to receive in the summer anyway. So if things that have been approved need to then go to an edited version that we work on and we revise or whatever, sometime in the summer, if the three of us end up meeting on our own, or we wait until August when we come together as a committee, I'm not sure time frame wise, but we're going to have that next batch. once we get some updated policy from Shipman and Goodwin anyway. So if we need to add that, and these are minor edits that we need to make to these current existing policies. But like that's what happens when our board wants us to work on a different time frame.
So how do you, I have not looked at our board member comments other than just opening it in the context of this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some, I mean, a lot of them say no change, but is the thinking that this is going to be discussed in our next policy committee meeting? Because some of these I can't do the red line with until we address these.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. So I think that we look them over potentially without having any, conversations about it, and we just bring them to the 3rd, since it will just be us anyway, and since Easton and Reading will not be there.
Okay, so okay. All right, I'm going to keep going through the red line as I was doing, recognizing we do not have all the comments. They're not final red line. And is our intention still to send everything to Shipman and Goodwin? That didn't appeal to Chris and John. I don't know when I don't know if I guess they're not thinking they're going to have any such final review.
Well, I don't think we needed to actually, and I didn't get to throw this in there earlier in the conversation, but I don't think we need to send everything to Shipman and Goodwin. I think it's just the discrepancies.
Well,
so
and I was thinking
we need clarification on this. Todd thinks this, Mike thinks this is what the committee discussed, and we're not sure if we're all in alignment and I think that's when we bring those 3, as an example, those 3 policies we're not sure how to finalize. That I think is what we bring to Shipman, but I don't think that they're necessarily reviewing every single, right?
I didn't think that either. I thought what would be helpful and necessary for us to be sure that we were in compliance is that we gave them the whole package basically and said, we're adopting these. And to your point, some of these we've made some changes that are more than tweaky changes. Mm-hmm. And here's what we're repealing, and here's what we're maintaining. So it's really just looking at across those 3 lists, are we covered? Have we repealed something that we haven't adequately replaced? Have we not repealed something that's going to get us into
They've already done that. They've already done that.
They did. Okay.
Prior to the first reading. So that's why they don't have to look it over again. And I think that was their concern is, why are we going to have them charge us more money to do something that they don't need to do? Because they've already done this. They've had the Excel sheets and everything. They've had.
So they cross-referenced everything. All right. I did not realize they had done that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. Okay. And that are the ones we're maintaining, they're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, they've made their recommendations where a while back when they had received questions from us and they provided the feedback that we were just going through today, in that same bucket of feedback, they had said, if you're going to do this, we don't recommend doing this. If you're going to adopt this, or if you're not going to adopt this, we do recommend,
Okay. And I do have that. That's the spreadsheet. That's in that spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. That you're referring to the spreadsheet with their comments in it.
Yes. So, and that's where they looked at everything across the board.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. I was not clear that they had actually looked at those 3 lists and made double sure, because their note does say like 10, I forgot the word they used, but it was like preliminary review pending final. Oh, like it doesn't say final review. It said you know.
Of some of our policies, right? Correct?
No, it was that
Oh.
spreadsheet says the header and their comments column
Mhm.
says, I forgot, I could go back, I'll look, but it was something like preliminary review pending more thorough final review. So is that required? Because that spreadsheet was not, in their view, final. It was what they did in a fairly quick manner to get us what we needed to move forward, but it was not their final, it was not their thorough review.
Right. The thorough, I believe, that you're talking about has to do with our policies, our current policies that we are retaining. And so they haven't thoroughly reviewed those. Anything that was already theirs, they know was reviewed and they responded with quick answers. But
Right.
anything that wasn't theirs, that's ours, that we have maybe worked on over the last 2 years, like some of the Title IX and
Yeah.
other existing ones that we thought were important to hold on to for now. Some of those they needed more time to go through, but I don't anticipate they're going to want us to keep them. They're going to always default to theirs being the preference.
But
So-
for our June 13th, we need to know that. Are we, that's what I'm getting at. On June, when we share everything, do they have significant issues with anything we want to retain, for example? And they're going to tell us, you cannot retain that one. You have to adopt this one. You've got it on your retain list, but you can't, it's not going to, you really need to, our recommendation is that you really need to adopt the new Title IX, for example, or the new whatever. And that's what we don't have. And that's what I'm getting at, the final review for our package of recommendations. Have they given you a timing for when they will have that to us?
No, they don't communicate with me.
Oh,
Mike, it does the bulk of the communication. So we'll have to ask him to try and get that from them. It will require, a fee, I'm sure. So that's the other part of it is our committee hadn't been approved to ask them to do work. Everything has had to go through him.
okay. So maybe we can talk, and because I don't want to run up fees and I don't want to do something that then Easton and Reading have to redo. Like if we can coordinate, but I think we need to talk through that, because I don't know what Easton and Reading are thinking about that as well. Are they thinking? I mean, I don't personally, I think we need to get their final, they've given us a preliminary thought, their preliminary thoughts. I think all three districts need to get their final thoughts on the stuff we're retaining. Don't surprise us on June 21st that, we really should have done that. Because
I believe the understanding is that they've already done all of that. Like anything that was pressing or really immediate, they already alerted us to.
okay.
But I think the understanding, and we have to just, understand this ourselves as the newbies in the process, is they're always going to prefer their own policies over what we have. But the policies that were from 1997 that were not in compliance, we have gone above and beyond to make sure that those are on our adopt list. Anything else that was more current from recent years that's on our retain list, they definitely have looked over, even if it was just preliminary. So if there were any red flags, they let us know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at that thing that says preliminary, and do we need a final thing?
Right. But they know the most recent ones that are like laws that just passed, or, new statutes, whatever, things that just, came out of the House last year that they needed to adopt. Anything that was like that was like immediate, they've alerted us to. It's just that now it's going to be preferential, some of our old language and old policies versus what isn't there. So.
Okay. All right. Well, how's Ava feeling?
She's good. She's good. We're doing better now.
Good. I guess we should officially adjourn.
Officially, but let's see here. I'm going to go through because I want to make sure that we covered everything. Administrative updates, we didn't get a ton, and Stephanie's already gone.
Right.
Let's see. Committee member comment. Do you have any other comments you wanted to mention?
No,
Okay. then
thank
we
you
will
for talking it
go-
through.
No problem. We'll go right on ahead and then adjourn the Region 9 Policy Committee meeting at 10:28 a.m. Just going to make note of that. Okay, thank you so much. I will.
Have a very good weekend. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you so much. Let's talk again with Cheryl about if we need any other additional meetings, but I think we should just move forward with next week.
Okay, we'll meet on the 3rd.
On the 3rd, yes.
Okay, I'll mark my calendar.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank you
thanks,
again.
Sarah.